for our special G20 special focus. And of course, digital transformation requires quite a strategic type of planning, training, security, as well as cultural alignment in order to overcome the multiple challenges which actually might delay digital transformation, especially for countries like South Africa, which are developing nations. And by utilizing technologies like, of course, your cloud computing, AI and data analytics together to improve operational efficiency, customer experiences, drive innovation and create new business models and revenue streams. However, the inequality in connectivity, lack of digital public infrastructure, mainly in developing countries such as South Africa, actually threatens to widen that digital divide gap. Well, for this discussion, first part of our discussion, I'm very pleased to be joined here in studio by SABC News specialist researcher Velemseni Mthiyane, who will be helping us further unpack some of the key priorities of this working group. So, Veli, a very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us on our special focus. So, let's talk about some of those pertinent conversations that should be at their final stages, of course, pertaining to digital transformation as we move closer to the G20 summit.
Yes, good afternoon to you, Alicia, and good afternoon to the viewers at home. Yes, and our graphic will show us the key priorities which are discussed at the South Africa's G20's presidency under the working group of digital economy. So, biggest issue here, Alicia, is the issue of connectivity. We know that without proper connection and with all the people getting connected, particularly in the internet, digital transformation becomes very difficult. 2.9 billion people globally do not have access to internet, and in South Africa here at home, about 18 million people still do not have access to internet, despite mobile phones, particularly smartphones, playing a huge role in improving access to internet, particularly in the far-flung areas where the digital infrastructure is not so strong and there aren't even people capable with money perhaps to have those gadgets like computers, laptops. So connectivity is one of the key issues
and
that are being discussed
data
there.
As well.
And yes, of course, it's a big issue, also the issue of the high cost of data. But if we look into the second part of it, the issue of digital public infrastructure, without the proper digital infrastructure, what is going to happen is that other communities will be left behind, particularly in the rural areas. So, and again, we know that most South Africans, they are still on the 2G network when it comes to their cell phones. So even their downloading speed and their uploading speed is affected. So there is very limited abilities that they could do when it gets to that. And of course, the digital innovation ecosystems, the SMMEs, how do they get empowered to transition from the traditional way to adopt the digital era way of doing business? For instance, maybe cashless society, for instance.
Absolutely.
And you need some certain gadgets to do that, and you need proper connectivity
hardware, software,
for that to be done. A mother there by the market who's selling Apple, they need to have some sort of a machine where you could tap your card and they would be fine. You see, and again, maybe lastly, there's the issue of inclusive and just artificial intelligence. The issue of artificial governance, artificial intelligence governance. Government needs to come together, the countries need to come together and come up with an ecosystem of policies, of the way they are doing things to ensure that artificial intelligence, when it's unfolding and it's adopted, it is within the ethical lines and it doesn't trespass and affect some human rights.
Absolutely. So, Velenkosin, thank you so much for this. We are going to take this discussion further with my panelist. That is, of course, SABC News specialist researcher, Mr. Veli Mthiyane. They're just giving us a precursor as we look, of course, into this very important topic of digital transformation and how our South African government in particular will be able to then effect these changes. Digital transformation involves a cultural shift that it requires governments to actually continually challenge the status quo. It also requires experiment with new approaches and also adaptation to the ever-changing market conditions as well as customer expectations. Let's listen to this report very quickly.
AI is transforming how the youth learn and live. The call for responsible policy is loud and clear. AI can already easily amplify manipulative information and produce fake content, and it's children who are most vulnerable to being manipulated or abused in these environments.
The intention, having identified that there are quite a number of things that are going to happen even on online platforms, how do we then safeguard and protect your children, ourselves as adults? So, and knowing that AI, amongst many other things, can still be used, obviously, to instill wrong information, to communicate wrong. So we need to make sure that from a regulatory point of view, the protections sits at the central of everything that we do.
But AI also brings numerous opportunities.
We are implementing the AI Act of the European Union. That sets the regulatory framework in which the business is actually dealing with AI and hopefully flourishing. And we would try to help them to actually come to terms with a data-driven business. And AI is most certainly core of it. And the second thing is, since we're aware that especially small and medium-sized companies might struggle with AI and might need help, we set up a project called Mission AI, where we bring together experienced companies, small companies, startups, but also companies and organizations working on certification so that small and medium-sized companies feel safely and securely to put AI products and services into the market.
Globally, the integration of artificial intelligence into SMMEs has enabled firms to enhance operational efficiency, expand market access, and foster innovation.
We've been talking about the fact that if we are a 1.2, 1.3 billion population, how do we make sure that we maximize on that economies of scale and not look at just South Africa with the 64 million, but we really look collectively. And then the entire thing, I mean, the opportunities that we have under the African Continental Free Trade means the borders are open. Let's trade with each other. Let's sell these products. Let the South African innovator have the reach of the entire continent. Equally,
a number of G20 working groups are still to take place ahead of the main summit in November. Lerato Fekisi, SABC News, Gqeberha.
Well, to further unpack this discussion, let's now extend a very warm welcome to Nongobela Jordan Gyani, the DG at the Department of Communications, alongside Mandilula Memanjezi of the African Union, European Union Youth Core Group think tank member. Ladies and gentlemen, DG, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Mandilambon, Kunjan. Enkosi, thank you so much. Welcome to both of you. So let's start, of course, welcome to a special G20 Focus. Maybe DG, let's start with you. You heard our precursing discussion there. And I suppose, of course, connectivity as well as implementation are going to be quite vital as we talk about digital transformation, specifically looking at the South African sphere. Talk to us about that.
Most definitely. I think that's our biggest challenge. If we're going to basically thrive in this fourth industrial revolution, if we are going to be one of those competitive countries when it comes to AI or any other emerging technology, if we want to thrive on innovation, especially local innovation, we need to make sure that we are connected. So one good thing is that I think as a country, comparatively to the rest of the continent as well, we are at least making some inroads. We still have about 32% of the population not connected, and I just want to unpack what we mean by that. We've identified that there are a number of barriers, and I think Mr. Veli also alluded to it. Obviously, there's the issue with regards to make sure that the connectivity or the broadband reaches the household. We're making some inroads with regards to that. At least we have now over in our program under the SA Connect, we've connected 1.8 million households. But we've seen the biggest challenge has been the affordability of smart devices.
Absolutely.
Now, for the average citizen in South Africa, we know that we've got over 18 million social grant recipients. You cannot afford a smart devices. So we've made some interventions in that regard, working with National Treasury in as far as looking at the import duties and also then removing those in terms of the tax barriers for those low-end devices. And then the other thing that we have to obviously focus on would be digital literacy.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? That is coupled with another priority under the G20, which is then talking about digital public infrastructure. That is basically looking at making sure that we advance in the digital identity, digital payment, making sure that the e-services are available online and accessible to all citizens. So it means the Gogo now, who's in the rural areas, who is probably also looking in terms of the social grants, they don't necessarily have to then take the taxi to town. It also means that the learner who's trying to learn online or is perhaps even looking for a job, those e-services are available to them. But we've got to also make sure that we basically upskill our society. And then I think obviously the third issue is what you addressed, the cost of data in our country. That is also another priority for us, and looking in terms of how then, I think we can increase the uptake and usage. Obviously, there's going to be much higher demand, and I think the mobile operators are now going to see that they've actually got to be more competitive and therefore reduce the pricing.
Very enlightening there, in fact, DG. Mandilula, I mean, so let's talk about how this will be effected and structured. What type of, effective conversations as well as moves are currently being put forward to ensure that, of course, you integrate the system positively?
Well, Sister Alicia, I must say that for the past couple of months, we've been busy with the research, first and foremost, the paper that we are yet to present to the Secretariat, and then from the Secretariat stage into the G20. I can say that there's a need for us now that we have unpacked all the white paper work. It's time for us then to, as engagement groups, to engage with one another to find that answer you just asked me. The policy paper we've been working on in the past couple of months, it's a framework as to these 20 countries and the rest of the world. How do we be in the same framework, in the same platform, as to then there's no lower country, higher country? How do we start this race in terms of the next 30 to 40 years in a collectivism, so to say? The issue of skills and paralleled with connectivity from the rural areas into the urbans is also a very fundamental criteria that we have been looking at.
Because we can't leave anybody behind.
Absolutely. And look, just a couple of years ago, we've been in the country talking about 4IR, and now the next conversation is AI.
Yeah.
So also in that conversation, and whilst we're talking about skills skills and development training, how do we then say with 4R, let's walk into AI whilst not disbanding or just letting go of the work the government has been doing with 4R into then this next stage.
Did you maybe just further engage us on government's current digital transformation roadmap? Because I was actually on the site right now, and it kind of looks like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs table, where of course all the people needs, customer needs need to be considered. Talk to us about that.
Most certainly. I think for us, and I'm glad you said that, at the core of it is to say, how do we make it seamless for the citizen?
Absolutely.
Right? You need one central place where they can go and they'll be able to get all the information. And as I said, obviously key to it would be your digital identity, because you've got to know who you are. And in terms of that identity is where you'll be able to access the variety of services. Another pillar within the digital transformation roadmap is then the issue of the digital payment, right? Now, we're not just looking at it from one side, where the people who, in terms of whether you need to pay for your school fees or you need to pay for driver's license, etc. But we're also looking in terms of the disbursement of the grants and other services of government to the citizens. Those who have to access your UIF, you know, so that's also going to be incorporated in there. And as I said, we're looking in terms of the single view of the citizen. There are obviously many other services that the citizen is also looking for, right, as I said. So we've got the analogy, you find it in the National Development Plan, of Thandi. So Thandi's whole life cycle is basically illustrated within the digital transformation from birth, meaning that you can be registered immediately, and then obviously that particular identity or that registration carries you throughout. So if you are then obviously needing to access in terms of early childhood education, again, Thandi is able to access that online. If you then need to go to primary, secondary school, high school, as well as then maybe when you now want to go into university or higher education, tertiaries, you're also wanting maybe to access NAFSAs. Again, in terms of your profile, that unique
Everything
identity.
will be digitized.
Everything is going to be digitized for you. You get a car, you start working.
Imagine.
Again, you'll be able to access all that information on the data. So that's what we're trying to do, to basically make it easy. You do not need to move from one government to another, because we've identified that as government, all that the citizen sees is government department as a single face.
Yeah,
it doesn't
working in
matter whether
silos
you're
as well.
Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Transport. From a citizen's perspective, it's government.
Mandilula, let's talk about the costs. How much will this, let's talk about the estimated cost to actually, effect all this infrastructure, because you're looking at initial technology investments, infrastructure, as well as the hardware and software, etc. How much are we looking at, roughly?
Look, there's no amounts been put in the air just yet.
I was actually looking for figures, but there's no estimations anyway.
No, not just yet. It's just the fundamentals, I think, for now, for the past 4 months, as to how do we roll this out and have a global, inclusive ecosystem and a digitalized ecosystem. Now, for example, the DG just mentioned 1 or 2 key points in terms of the fintech side of aspects of the world. In my life with the African Union, European Union Youth Core Group, we, as the African Union counterparts, are very much championing your free Africa trade, and we want to have youth being the examples of us championing the youth, the free Africa, the AEFCFTA, free Africa trade, with inclusion of your traveling, business, schooling for student exchange program, having this conversation of an AU-EU passport, digital passport,
a one-stop,
also then flanks that conversation, So these are the conversations I'm having in different corners, but I seek to align these conversations that I'm having in different corners as we build down to the inaugural, to the initial G20 summit. So every month now is essential that we are in discussions with government and with our fellow engagement groups in aligning all that we've been working on in our respective corners.
And primarily along those concerns, Mandila, what are some of those, specifically when you compare South Africa to the other emerging economies in Africa?
Look, there have not been much concerns, no negatives in terms of the research and the policy paper that we've been working on, more positives, because your top countries have seemed to understand some of the issues we, South Africa and the rest of the continent is
facing.
facing.
They're far ahead as well in terms of progression,
And they're far ahead as well, and that's why I raised the point of 4R. Let's not leave the work that we've been doing to 4R, but rather enhance it and integrate it with this work that we are doing now. Also, the work that we are doing, essentially the G20 work in all the different engagement groups, let's not do it and then have it been passed into another country next year and we don't take or adopt some of the works that we've been working on, so to say. Let us then really adopt them and then create what you call legacy projects and legacy programs.
Maybe if you can get in there.
If I may just come in on that, I think first and foremost we do appreciate the participation of the private sector, as well as other working groups like the B20, T20, there's the Youth 20, etc. Because it does call on all of us together to basically collaborate. And as you can see, the common theme amongst everybody has been this issue of digitization, one way or the other,
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
And then the second issue, I think, part of then obviously the G20, South Africa's presidency for G20 is also looking at AI, right? And in the form of it being equitable, as well as also supporting innovation in Africa. So we're not looking at our presidency as South Africa just so purely because we're a G20 country, but we're looking at it in terms of the beneficiation and scaling it up for the continent. And what he's just said about the importance of making sure that we have lasting legacy. So ours is then to also crowd in support from all the other G20 countries, as well as also the international community. You've got the Knowledge Partners, which is a think tank of resource as well as multinational and multilateral organizations. And we've basically identified under the AI to then say, we want to build and also leverage on Africa as well as South Africa's capabilities in this regard. You know, youth is very innovative. So there's a lot of innovation that is already coming up, and we're just saying, let's find a way of making sure that we provide and we expand that platform to the rest of the continent. And that obviously is not just going to end when we hand over the presidency end of November, but it is going to be one of those legacies that we can then make sure that there's innovation that is coming out of these AI platforms that we're creating.
And I'm glad that you touched on that point, DG, because, you know, there are concerns also, Mandilula, about the fact that AI and this digital transformation is actually going to replace warm bodies in the workplace. And also, you know, DG, whenever there's change, a lot of people are resistant to it. So how are you going to slowly integrate all these with the skills management, with your security costs, with your training of skills and all those maintenance costs? How are you then going to bring this together also to reassure those warm bodies of employers that, you know what, this means we can do, you know, double the amount of work in a short space of time. We are not necessarily saying you are incapable or trying to replace you.
No, definitely. I think that's the approach from us. It must be developmental orientated, and it must also be human centric
and inclusive as well.
And inclusive as well. So we want to make sure that you are utilizing it for the beneficiation, right? So we're still going to, like, for example, when we're now building up on the algorithm for the AI, you need humans.
Yes.
You're right. Somebody has to feed that information within the machine.
Yes.
Now, you also have AI in agriculture. Again, AI is not going to be able to actually pick up that crop and produce. It's not going to be necessarily, you know, to that last mile delivery per se in certain areas. So we've got to look at it from that, in terms of that particular opportunity. And also, I think from a youth perspective, one of the excitement is in Africa, we've got so many languages and so many dialects. Somebody has to be able to put that up on various platforms, right? And so that's the opportunities for us. I don't think that it necessarily means that people are going to be replaced. It merely means that there's more efficiency. It will enhance whatever productivity that you've already put.
So there needs to be a lot of more effective communication around that particular important aspect. Mandilula, maybe in closing as well, I mean, look, there can never be any meaningful digital transformation, of course, without digital public infrastructure. Our G20 members at this stage, states talking the investment strategy to actually deal with the inequality of course, digital transformation due to inadequate digital infrastructure in general.
No, absolutely. In fact, the previous task call that we were working on last month was in and around AI, and it was an emphasis on AI. And one of the things we are driving towards is to align governance for all, aligned governance for AI. That includes also then the ethics. Framework for each and every industry sector and sub-industry sector, because you'd find that some more so when it comes to cultural and creative industries, there's much integration. And with that integrative alignment at times, how do we then also align these ethics? Now going to, the DPIs, as you mentioned, and I'm glad the DG is here because we see your post offices, your post office and other, you could say, assets that the government has that we who know or clued up in this realm of the world can say, look, we can transform.
We can improve it here.
Yeah. We can transform it there, we can aid it there, because the private sector in this country is showing us that, look, your Take-A-Lot can work with your DSTV multi-choice. So if we're looking at it from a state point of view, why can't the SABC work with Postnet and Post Office in creating
collaboration once again, collaboration once again.
Thank you so much for that. You made my job much easier.
Any closing statements very quickly, did you?
Precisely on this, and I just want to maybe emphasize again on that particular issue with regards to AI. I think there's also, we're putting up regulations. So we call it toolkits because obviously it will vary from country to country.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But then one most important thing, and I think what we want to achieve out of this is basically meaningful connectivity. Universal meaning connectivity for everybody, but more so beneficial for South Africa as well as the continent.
People first, the continent first. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for that very engaging conversation and enlightening one as well. That was, of course, Nongobela Jordan Ekyani from the Department of Communications, alongside Mandilula Memanjezi, AU-EU think tank member, as of course we are looking at digital transformation on our segment here on our special focus on G20 matters. We're going to see you after the break for more news. Stay with us.